All right, those are live visuals from Pietermaritzburg, where former President Jacob Zuma has just concluded his address to MK party supporters. Again, they're reiterating his position that they are not voting, or rather are voting for MK because the ANC with its current leadership is an ANC they particularly don't recognize. Well, our reporter Nhlakanipho Magwaza is covering that event and will give us a summation a bit later on. Let me just extend my greetings. A very good afternoon. I'm Fundo Mabalani, and this is the Week in Review. It's the show where we unpack some of the biggest stories to come out of the week. More news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. The Ngema family has announced the funeral and memorial service details for the national icon Dr. Mbongeni Ngema. The burial of the legendary playwright and theatre maestro will be held on Friday, the 5th of January 2024. Meanwhile, prominent figures in the film and entertainment industry in Durban have paid tribute to the renowned South African playwright, actor, musician and producer. The 68-year-old musician was described as a legend of the entertainment industry. Ngema became famous for creating the 1987 stage musical Sarafina.
Mbongeni Ngema was born in 1955 in Verulam in Durban. He grew up at his grandparents' home in rural KwaHlabisa, north of the province. At the age of 12, he taught himself to play guitar. He later attended high school in Durban. In the 70s, he moved to Johannesburg and joined Gibson Kente as a trainee actor and singer. In 1981, he co-wrote the popular play Woza Albert, followed by the musical Asina Mali 2 years later, which were a success in the USA. This success paved the way for Ngema's international triumph with the musical Sarafina in 1987. It tells the story of the 1976 Soweto uprising. Sarafina was produced as a musical film which had its debut at the Cannes Film Festival in 1992. Produced by Anat Singh, the film starred Leleti Khumalo, Miriam Makeba, John Kani, and Whoopi Goldberg.
And Ngema was a very special person, very creative and hugely talented. I think he was one of the most creative people in our country during that period of the 80s when he did shows like Asina Mali, Woza Albert, and then obviously Sarafina.
Ngema received several nominations for the Tony and Grammy Awards.
He took it to a whole new level. I think starting off that base, he brought those shows, did them in South Africa against the apartheid government, and got their wrath, but then he took it to the world. And that is where he really found audiences responding and learning about apartheid by watching those shows. And thereafter, obviously, we did the films.
Ngema was known for his ability to spot talent.
He was a humble person who insisted on excellence and quality. He had an eye of talent. You could see even in his productions that there were no chances there. Everyone in his production was a quality, and he will make sure that he fine-tuned them, he trained them, and become world stars.
The family has asked to be given space to grieve. Blonde Khatebe, SABC News, Durban.
On the 9th of September, South Africa learned that Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the Prime Minister of the Zulu monarch and nation, was no more. On the 11th of December, the Zulu monarch was dealt another blow when the Pretoria High Court declared the recognition of Zulu monarch Mrs. Zulu Kazwelithini by President Cyril Ramaphosa as invalid. Now, to unpack the year that was in the Zulu Kingdom, we're joined by Professor Musa Xulu, Executive Director of the Heritage Development Trust and founder of Indonsa Yesizwe think tank. Professor, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, my sister. Good afternoon to your viewers and everyone in the land.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Perhaps let's start with just looking back at the time the news of the passing of Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi broke. What were your thoughts, particularly around the stability of the royal house around that period?
Well, my thoughts immediately was that it was firstly end of an era, because Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi embodied Zuluness. He understood very well Zulu cultural heritage. He was also a very noteworthy politician and a leader, for that matter, a Christian, all of those combined in one person. For the Zulu royal household, he was the one since the 1950s that has been holding together the Zulu royal household through three kings, really: King Cyprian Zulu, King Goodwill Zwelithini, and the current king, who, as you have said, is also facing some court cases. But without him, I immediately thought that it was going to be difficult and uphill for the Zulu royal household to hold together without such a central figure as Chief Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi.
And then at the top of your mind, following his passing, were you somebody who has followed and studied the Zulu monarch? Were you somebody that could easily identify who could take over from Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi just to be the Prime Minister?
Well, it's difficult to say. The first thought, of course, that are circulating, and I would support that, is around Inkosi Prince Joseph Buthelezi. Of course, he's more of a modern compared to his father. Because the Buthelezis for the past maybe, let me say 100 years, have been more than 100 years, have been very central to the Zulu kingdom. It may have to come from there. But outside of that, the king himself has put the matter aside for the time being, because I think it's going to be very difficult to find anyone to fill those shoes. But the one person that comes to mind for me is the king of the Buthelezi, the chief of the Inkosi of the Buthelezi, Prince Joseph Buthelezi.
And it seems that that is something that many, or a particular name that many had spoken of even before his father had passed away. But then to the 11th of December judgment, we now had a judgment where Judge Davis found that the recognition of the king was invalid. He set it aside, and when looking at that judgment, he stressed that his duty was not necessarily to pronounce on whether King Misuzulu was the rightful heir, but that rather he would deal with the process, because Judge Madondo had dispensed with that matter about who's the rightful heir, whether some agreed or disagreed. But he stated that his was not to pronounce on that, but rather the process. And he found that the process followed by the president of the country was incorrect. Just talk to us about your views on that one.
Let me start with the issue of Judge Madondo. Judge Madondo, yes, he had pronounced on the issue, but the issue of who the rightful king was not in front of him. That's a matter for the courts later to deal with. Secondly, Judge Davis said he was not an appeal court, and therefore his court could not deal with the issue of whether Judge Madondo, because that would have to be dealt with by a higher court in terms of what Judge Madondo found out. In terms of processes, what has emerged, and maybe also because I used to have lots of chats with Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi about the Zulu kingdom. What has emerged is that some of the processes that were followed in the royal household were exclusive. Many members of the royal household were excluded from the meetings, or some meetings were called under false pretenses. And therefore, starting from there, anything that was fed to the president was based on flawed processes being followed. And the president, of course, we all know that he then made a mistake by recognizing King Misuzulu before the court cases that were there were exhausted. So that's the problem. And the way I look at it now, in hindsight, it's likely that the ultimate outcome will be that the matter should be brought back to the Zulu royal household to deal with from scratch. In which case, the motivation, culturally, both Prince Misuzulu, King Misuzulu and Prince Malate, they have 50-50 chances at cultural motivation level, which is a requirement of the law. to see who will ascend. It's no longer the one above the other. It's a 50-50 kind of situation. So what would happen then is that, and this is regrettable, because if Prince Mangosuthu was still around, he would be the one to can call those meetings or cause someone within the royal household to call those meetings. I don't know whether they have such a leader right now, because somebody needs to rise up above everyone and call the meetings of all the warring factions, including the king and his siblings, his siblings now have gone to Sam Amakosi to say they would love to pray, to ask for him to be removed. So it's a complicated situation. If it goes back to the Zulu royal family, it may end in a different result altogether.
A number of people, just when the factions were exposed to the public, expressed their disappointment at the manner in which things were handled of a Zulu royal family, saying that one would have assumed that such issues would have never found themselves in court anyway, that perhaps the royal council, the family elders would have been the ones to sit and discuss some of these issues, but they had to then be ventilated before a court of law. What are your views on just the inability to have contained these issues within the royal house?
Well, it shows lack of leadership. There is no one, as I said earlier, astute enough in the Zulu royal family to can bring them together in a dignified manner. And I'm not looking down upon anyone. There are many efforts towards getting all the factions to come together. But there must be one particular leader that stands out and above the rest and be able to call the Zulu royal family together. The problem is, when there are not spaces for people to talk, then they rush, they go to court. What has happened, unfortunately, and this is very unfortunate, because kingdoms around South Africa and in SADC, they always look at the Zulu kingdom really as a model kingdom that they can look at. And what has happened over the past year or so has been very unfortunate. And unfortunately, towards the end of his life, President Mangosuthu was complaining about the manner in which King Zulu had treated him, and he died crying, literally. So that ritually could be a problem if it's not sorted out according to Zulu custom as well.
Professor, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That was Professor Musaqulu, Executive Director of the Heritage Development Trust and founder of Indonsa Yesizwe think tank. The city of Joburg has reassured Rea Vaya commuters and continued uninterrupted services. This after the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg placed Piotrans, that's the company that operates Johannesburg's Rea Vaya bus system, under business rescue last week. The city says work to refurbish its existing stations in 2 phases between Soweto and Joburg CBD has commenced. It plans to refurbish 8 of its stations, which will run until mid-2024. Now, the city says road markings and signage is also underway. In a statement, the city says it's well within its plans to roll out BRT services and other modes of public transport to further achieve its integration plan and objectives. It further states that its response to its objective of integrating public transport modes, it has provided commuters with customer care centres for ease of reporting complaints. It says these centres will be available for all commuters across the various public transport systems in the city. We shift our focus to this story now. The City of Cape Town's Fire and Rescue Service responded to over 1,000 fire incidents in just over a week. Mayoral Committee Member for Safety, that's JP Smith, says more than half of the recorded fires were felt fires. He says there are strong indications that the recent fires in the Cape Town area were ignited deliberately. Smith says some fires, like the Simonstown Table Mountain and Glencare are, among others, were started in hard-to-reach places, and the weather has been a contributing factor. For more now, we're joined by, or rather in studio, by Trevor Abrams, who is the Managing Director of Working on Fire. Mr. Abrams, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Fundo.
Now, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, we all would appreciate that it is fire season, but the number of incidents that have been reported seems to be somewhat worrisome, especially because it's left a number of people destitute. What are your views around the number of incidents that have been recorded thus far?
Well, we've actually had a record fire season this year in terms of area lost. So working on fire has been at fires where we've actually had 1.9 million hectares burnt. But this is not particularly unique to ourselves. If we actually look at the world for 2023, it's been a record wildfire season across the globe. So we were part of the Canadian firefighting where they lost 18.5 million hectares. Now that's the size of the whole of the Western Cape and part of the Free State, just to give you a sense of it. But we all heard about the European fires, the island of Tenerife, the Hawaiian fires, and then of course also ourselves here in the northern part of the country. We've had an extreme fire season. Northwest has lost 1.2 million hectares. We remember the Loatla military base fire in Northern Cape where we lost 6 of our servicemen. So it's been a particularly devastating fire season across the globe. And I think this is clearly related to the broader challenges of climate change that are confronting us.
That was actually going to be my next question, that what are the contributing factors? Because we keep reporting of the SA Weather Service's warnings around strong winds, so there are going to be even more destructive winds. So would we say that just generally, because of those strong winds, there would be risk of more fires?
Well, there's a little bit more to it. There's the La Nina and El Nino factor.
Yes.
So La Nina brings us, for us at least, a cooler and wetter season, and we've had that for at least 3 years now. So that means a lot of new growth emerges, and that's fuel for the fire, if you like, in the wildlands, right? And from about July this year, it switched over to El Nino, and that's hotter, drier, windier. And we've seen the impact of El Nino already across the globe. And so what we're seeing is the start of the impact of El Nino. It's expected to be much worse towards the end of this summer season. And if it continues with its strength at the moment, certainly the next year, and possibly drought. So you have those broad global climatic factors that are playing into it. And certainly in the Western Cape area, much of the fire sort of regime there is driven by the winds. And we've had very, very strong winds. One night in the Simonstown fire, and they're typically around the Cape Peninsula, the wind dies down towards evening. It was howling midnight. So, you know, that's what made it impossible to contain the blaze. Fortunately, the wind also shifted in very strange directions and avoided the informal settlement in Radial, and then took the fire just above the Scarborough village. So, you know, that's a wind-driven phenomenon, and not unusual, but I think, as everyone is saying, with climate change, our fires are going to be more intense, more frequent, and even burning in areas which don't normally burn.
You touched on our deployments internationally. One would think perhaps that's a vote of confidence, that perhaps our firefighting skills are high up there with the most highly skilled of them all.
Most certainly, I think working on fire at 860 personnel deployed in 4 separate deployments. So the Canadians flew us out in jumbo planes from KMI Airport to Canada. And as you say, you know, for them to come back and ask us on 4 separate occasions, and this is the 5th year we've done it, is clearly one. And then also their testimonies over there, the record that we get from what we've done over there, they are recognized for their work that they've done there, the capacity to, in fact, do their job that they've done there, as well as the spirit to which they bring to the camp. So the singing and the dancing is seen as a big sort of upper in the camp, in the mood of the camp, where our firefighters, they're young people, they come back after a full day's work and they're still able to sing and dance at the end of the day.
And then to the work that you do as firefighters, one would say it's one of those thankless jobs as well, where we see daily, constantly, you're putting your lives at risk for communities. What kind of training does one undergo, particularly psychologically, because it's not only that you place your life at risk, but you also encounter very disturbing scenes. Some people are not saved in such scenes.
So our training is quite intense. It's a very physically demanding training, and even at the recruitment level. You know, first thing you have to pass, in fact, is the 2.4 fitness test where you have to run within a set time. And fitness remains a regime that continues throughout your career. So you test it on a weekly basis in terms of meeting the standards. But you're quite right in terms of the spirit. So there's a very strong ethos of building a team ethos. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So you look after each other, you take care of each other. One of our tests is a 34-kilometer hike with all your gear. But you have to get across the line with all your team members. So if anyone is faltering, people will lift their gear from them and help them along. So it's a very strong esprit de corps. But one of the sort of essential things, we came back from Canada without any major injury. there were about 8 fire-related deaths in Canada this year, is our emphasis on safety. So we don't face a fire in a tree, and put our life at danger. We actually emphasize the safety. So there's a very strict and effective safety regime that applies on the fire line, where people identify safety routes, exit routes. In Simonstown one night, when it really ran away, we had to call our firefighters off the line, not to the road, but actually to the burnt-out area. So that's obviously safer, to retreat into those spaces. So it's managed in a very, very, very sensitive way for safety, because we don't want our lives to be lost. And I think with all the fires that we've had in the Western Cape now, there's no reported firefighters who've lost their lives, or the citizens, for that matter. So that's a real testimony to how the fires have been managed there by all the services that responded.
But then in terms of debriefing, is it very rigorous or intense that once they have gone into a scene that is a bit disturbing, would they agree, or is there some sort of a rigorous type of debriefing session that many of them go under?
So part of our regime is that after every deployment, that means we're coming off the fire line, you have an after-action review. So people review the actions, critique each other in terms of how it's going on. We also have an established social development program that provides counseling and support services to our firefighters. So it's quite an integrated supportive network that we have around them. And in the case of the Western Cape, so there we have firefighters on duty in the day and another team going on at night. So when the day team come off, our support team are also making the warm meals and making sure they get some rest. And recovery.
Well, Mr. Abrams, we must certainly thank you as a nation for all the work that you do for all of us citizens. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. That's Trevor Abrams. He is the Managing Director of Working on Fire. More news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us.
As we enter the news.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, on a lighter note, with 2023 coming to an end, we reflect on one of the stories that made the rounds on social media. Johannes Hopane from Hamashashane outside Polokwane in Limpopo trended on social media early in the year when he claimed to have confronted a lion. This after a pride of lions had escaped from a nearby game farm and was spotted roaming in the area. His video reached millions of views on social media, with some artists composing songs about it.
What was supposed to be a horrific story of Hamashashane, where a pride of lions had been on the loose, became a social media sensation. This was when one of the residents, Johannes Hopane, was explaining that he confronted a lion that attacked a herd of donkeys. His video made rounds on social media, reaching 3 million views and over 50,000 shares.
Nearly 5,000
TikTok users used the same sound from the video to recreate their own satirical videos, bringing joy to their followers. Hopane, who works as a mechanic in Polokwane, says he was caught by surprise when the video started to trend. I was surprised when I started to trend on social media because people came to where I am currently working to visit me, to engage with me and to take some pictures. I am glad though that I was not trending for the wrong reasons, and I have put smiles on the faces of many South Africans. The 64-year-old Hopane says his clients at his workshop in Polokwane couldn't believe it when they saw him on TV and social media. I was inundated by the number of calls from family and relatives when they saw the video. Others were worried about my well-being because I was nearly attacked by the lion. Fortunately, they found that I was fine and I didn't do anything wrong to trend. Some artists have released some songs about Ropani and his trending lion story.
One of my goals, I Fetakayo, Remafiela Sniga, Dauki Twenya, I want to be Chavelo TK Mabo, General again, Nam to Fetakanda.
I made a song from the video that was trending about the man from Ramashashani. I am happy because people liked the song and started to follow me in numbers because of him. I wish him good health and may God bless him. Ropani says he wishes that his songs could play on the radio and other platforms to keep on entertaining people. I'm Koke Jomadao, SABC News, Polokwane.
Now, for Zimbabwe, the year 2023 was anticipated to bring change and transformation to the southern African nation. However, as events unfolded, it became clear it was just a repeat of the same old script. Human rights abuses, contested elections, and an uneven political and electoral playing field, political violence, allegations of government corruption, judicial capture, and economic meltdown all constitute the now familiar elements of the Zimbabwean story. President Emmerson Mnangagwa was re-elected for another 5-year term, and politician Job Sakhala clocked more than 500 days behind bars. We revisit some of the critical moments in Zimbabwe over the last 12 months.
Zimbabweans kick-started 2023 in full election mode. The country's electoral management body, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, submitted its delimitation report to President Emmerson Mnangagwa in early January. Zimbabwe's parliament had also presented its own findings and recommendations to the report, but most were ignored and new boundaries were gazetted.
Compile the debate in Parliament, which can give you the insight of the feelings by members of Parliament, resulting in the construction and compilation of their report to you. So, if I may present it to you, Madam.
Just a fortnight after the gazetting of the new electoral boundaries, a new bill was introduced in Parliament. The bill sought to give government greater control over operations of non-governmental organizations. The Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Bill further sought to ban NGOs and civil society organizations from engaging in politics.
And non-governmental organizations play a complementary role in supporting government programs. As they do so, they must observe the rule of law and act within the laws of our country. Recently, bold steps were taken to enforce the law. Non-compliant entities and those that have deviated from their original approved mandates risk deregistration. No entity is above the law.
In March, an expose by an Al Jazeera documentary, The Gold Mafia, brought to light alleged illicit financial flows from Zimbabwe. The documentary also included serious allegations of abuse of diplomatic immunity, illicit gold trading, corruption, and money laundering. However, the country's central bank was quick to deny the allegations.
I'm the custodian of the financial system in this country. And the allegations which are in those small snippets that we saw, it's about money laundering. By the way, money laundering is a serious, very, very serious. Many people in this country, they don't know what it means. Because if people say to me, well, did I respond fast, or was I not supposed to wait? Waiting for what? When the house is burning. You are told that there is allegations of money laundering in your country. And that the Zulu bank is the one that is cleaning this suit called laundering. And then someone you sleep comfortably.
One people, one nation, one vision.
In April, the country's main opposition political party began its own internal process of selecting its candidates that would represent the party in the general elections.
We've already started the process of radically transforming how we choose our candidates. Candidates are going to be chosen by you, not by leaders. By you, not by the leader. You in your community, tell us who is the best representative in terms of integrity, honor, accountability, accessibility, and also visibility. Don't choose people who are MPs as in missing person.
In May, the country took delivery of 18 helicopters from the Russian Federation. The handover took place at a time when most Western nations were increasing their efforts to isolate Moscow due to its role in the ongoing conflict with Ukraine.
Recently, we're experiencing pressure from certain Western countries that go to Petersburg in July for the Africa-Russian Federation Summit. Not long ago, a few months ago, African heads of state were in Washington. Russia never complained.
In June, President Mnangagwa proclaimed 23rd August as Election Day. 11 candidates were initially cleared to run in the presidential race. However, a former ZANU-PF member, Savio Kasakwero, was disqualified. Only a single female candidate took part in the race. In a change of circumstances, Harare agreed to allow the EU to observe its elections and sign an administrative arrangement. The EU deployed 150-member election observer mission that arrived from early July.
We will have a core team of 11 experts, and they are specialized in different areas: politics, human rights, elections, media, gender, security, and other areas. They will arrive in a week's time, roughly. And then we have a team of 46 long-term observers. They will come mid-July, and 44 short-term observers. They will just come before Election Day. And finally, we will have 44 locally recruited short-term observers.
The ugly face of violence was once again witnessed in Zimbabwe's politics following violent clashes in Harare and the brutal killing of one member of the opposition.
Every time we have elections in Zimbabwe, there has to be loss of lives. That can't be. That's undermining the essence of the liberation struggle. The liberation struggle was about one man, one vote. It was about the sovereignty of the people. It was the will of the people.
Then came the big showdown. Polling was marred by many irregularities, and voting was extended by an extra day. As the ruling ZANU-PF was sensing victory, election observers presented damning reports of the election process.
The mission noted that some aspects of the harmonized elections fell short of the requirements of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, the Electoral Act, and the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections of 2021.
So help me God.
Despite the criticism, Mnangagwa took the oath of office and formed a new government.
Very much.
The country ended the year by hosting Africa's largest AIDS conference, the International Conference on AIDS in Africa.
There are 5 countries, including Zimbabwe, that have also already achieved those midterm targets of 2025. Botswana, Eswatini, Rwanda, and Tanzania. 16 other countries are close to them, also heading towards achieving the midterm targets, meaning that we could end AIDS as a public health threat in those countries by 2030. So that's good news to celebrate, but all is not well.
Political activist Job Sikala clocked more than 500 days behind bars without conviction. Now many are hoping 2024 will bring a change of fortunes, not only for Sikala, but the whole country. Sophie Mkwena, SABC News.
And that's where we leave it for today. We're back tomorrow. Enjoy your afternoon further.